and cometh, and the appreciation you could get in potentially another strong year in gold and silver may very well recuperate that tax bite. Now, it could take a year, could take a little longer, so the pros and cons of that is something we can discuss on an individual basis. The next question is, if either of you gentlemen can answer this, what is the best book you could recommend, or books on constitutional law?
You've got mail.
I don't know of too many books on constitutional law, but the only one I've seen is a textbook that a good friend of mine, chancellor at Patrick Henry College and founder of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, Mike Ferris, wrote. I think that his book on constitutional law is very, very good. I'm limited in that because I'm not a lawyer, never did go to law school, but from what I've read of that book, I really enjoy it. And Stu is more qualified to answer that than me.
Stuart, are you still with us? Stuart Rhodes? It looks like here he is. Stuart, can you recommend a book on constitutional law?
That book, Kurt?
It's a textbook on constitutional law by Michael Ferris, who's a chancellor of Patrick Henry College in Purcellville, Virginia. That's the best one that I've seen, but I haven't seen an awful lot of them, to be honest about it. I'm not a lawyer.
Well, I would say anything by Judge Napolitano, and he has several books out that are all excellent. Also, anything by Rob Natelson, and I believe Rob Natelson's book, if you go to the 10th Amendment Center's website, you'll find a link there to Professor Rob Natelson's book. It's about original intent and Constitution. And I would also recommend Thomas Wood's book on nullification. It's also very well done and shows you, once again, the constitutional path to resisting federal unconstitutional action and tyranny by using the states. And so I would recommend all those three. Anything by Judge Napolitano, Rob Natelson, Natelson, I believe, and then also Thomas Woods. And go to the 10th Amendment Center's website. And the 10th Amendment Center is also another great organization that I'm on their speaking tour, the Nullify Now tour, and that's an organization I'm going to be introducing, John and Dr. Elliott to as well. They're doing a lot of good work when it comes to that important prong of state sovereignty and state resistance.
Thank you, Stuart. Next question is, will the president use UN troops?
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, if we're going to have, if he's going to order anybody to come to your home and try to take away your food storage and your guns and oppress you, I certainly hope that he brings in foreign troops other than our own.
years, and then in a year and a half, the bottom fell out, and that was the complete turmoil. But even after that year and a half of utter nonsense and catastrophe and mayhem and civil unrest and poverty and looting was over, it took many, many years to recover from that. And so you could be looking at 5 to 10 years of recovery before you see life back to normal, but there's going to be a definite period of just utter catastrophe while things are being worked out. And that's the part that we have to prepare for, is the utter catastrophe where there could be food shortages, disruption in power, like I've seen with the internet tonight, or disruptions in food. When people don't have food, when they starve, people turn into completely different creatures, even the best of us. And so we really need to prepare.
Gerald Celente, another source you should go to, and again, I hope I'm not cutting out, it's trendsresearch.com, one of the world's foremost trends forecasters, also an economist. And the point Kirk just made, he says, Celente in his New York style, he says, when people lose everything and they have nothing left to lose, they lose it. And there was a question here, Kirk, about confiscatability of silver. The actual question is, I'm reading it, what silver is not confiscatable? Perhaps you can just inform on the overall issues of confiscation.
The only thing that was confiscated in 1933 was bullion-type gold. Collectibles, religious relics, rare coins, they were not gold in your teeth. That wasn't collected. It was just the bullion coins, the stuff that was used kind of as currency at the time. And that law is still on the books. Silver has never been confiscated from the public. And so I wouldn't necessarily be concerned about silver being confiscated because it's first and foremost an industrial metal. Collectible. I do not. Collectibles to me are something that's not liquid on the back end. I view those as investment grade coins, but anything that's 15% or more than spot price of the underlying metal is non-confiscatable.
Thank you. We've got a question. Larry's going to provide the next question.
Stuart, this is for you. It's actually two questions combined into one. Where would the safe spots in this country be in the case of the collapse? And what do you think our military will do if that collapse occurs?
Safe places to live, and what will the military do?
Well, I think probably the safest places to be under that worst case scenario would be in rural areas with sparse populations. That's one of the reasons why I picked Montana of all the different states in the Union. I could have lived anywhere I wanted to, but I picked Montana for good reason. So I would say, and this is advice that you can go find on survivalblog.com. It's another good resource. James Wesley Rawls runs that. He has a book out, a couple different books on. He has one book called, When the Ass Hits the Fan, and it's a good book. But he talks about relocation, and the best thing is pick, a place where you've got good growing season and good farmland, and that means two things. One, you can grow food, and your neighbors will have food and less likely to want to come and take your food. Like here in Montana, the average person where I live is already on wood, a wood stove for their heat. They have propane tanks, and they're about 80% off grid already. And quite a few of them grow gardens and even have livestock. So I think that's probably a safer place to go. And the second question was, what will our military do? I think, like I said, it's kind of up in the air. What they will do, in large part, depends on what you do. And the less you need help, the more likely they are to do the right thing. And so the more squared away the American people are, the less of an emergency it is. If we all had, so for example, if every American had the more than ideal of a year's worth of food storage for the whole family, then you wouldn't have a crisis. Even if you had no money, you'd still eat. And you wouldn't have, food riots because everyone would have food. So that'd be the ideal. We're not there, obviously. So the closer we get to that ideal, the more of us who are squared away and prepared, the more likely it is that the military will do the right thing and will not go along with orders to impose martial law. That's why it's incredibly important that we get off our butts and do what we can.
Kurt, this would be directed to you. With millions of Americans unemployed or underemployed, barely hanging on, if they don't have the assets to buy gold and silver, what would be the basic necessities that the average person could get to try to ensure that they can survive the ongoing collapse?
Well, what I would say, what Stuart was talking about earlier, grains, foods, beans, things of that nature, some source of fresh water supply. You can't live without water. And so maybe like a gravity-fed water filter of some sort that you can get at any hiking store, sporting goods store. Stuff like that is where I would go. And then anything that's barterable, whether it's ammunition, food, silver, you can buy like pre-1965 dimes and quarters. A dime right now is worth about, I don't know, $4 or something like that. So that's actual silver. And so you could actually start acquiring little bits at a time, and every little bit is going to help. Don't ever discount that. Anything that you can do to stash away is going to be good.
I'd also like to add something extremely valuable during these periods of time that you can begin to stockpile. Bad word, I guess, but we can begin to acquire on a weekly basis with some excess cash. Soap, toothpaste, toilet paper, over-the-counter medicines, cigarettes, liquor, matches. These things become extremely valuable when they're not acquirable. And you can buy generic brands by the case, a little bit at a time. And these are barter items so that you could barter with these items. So you don't have to barter with your gold and silver unless you needed to. And clearly the gold and silver will be worth quite a bit. You might be able to feed your family for a month on a handful of silver. Next question.
Yes, sir. This would be directed towards you. What comment can you make about Glenn Beck's recent announcement and research on the SEIU and the mortgage fraud conversation?
I haven't really seen that yet. You're talking about the recording of the radical who's advocating an intentional collapse of the mortgage industry by people withdrawing their mortgages or withdrawing payments.
I think that's what they're referring to, Stuart.
Right. Well, like I said earlier, when I came in after Kurt, the banks are part of this. I mean, I worry sometimes that some of these leaks or whatnot are ways of distracting us from what's really going on. It's not just the communist leftovers from the 60s who want this. It's the power elites, the world power elites themselves. It's the folks who run the IMF. So it certainly is a concern, but pay attention to the fact that this is call it what it is, conspiracy, but it's not simply confined to one particular part of the political spectrum. It's not just, radical communists within a